You know, every week, believe it or not, I do read the Gospels and the Bible stories on Monday morning. And I say to myself, these lessons that we read, what difference do they make in what you do with your life when you leave this place after worship? And ultimately, what does it really mean in life to be a Christian? You know, today, the story is Jesus calling his disciples. And he goes by the Sea of Galilee, and he calls Peter and James and John and a couple others, and they immediately follow him. And they follow Jesus into the synagogues where Jesus teaches his Jewish people how to be better people. He opens their eyes to a new way of life and to look at people and not judge them on the basis of religion or who's better than anybody else. He tries to teach his disciples that a person is based on their dignity, their inner spirit, and who they are as God's children. And it seems so simple. But then again, why is religion today so complicated? Why does religion divide us? And when you say the word Christian, there are so many different kinds of Christian, you wonder what it really means. One of the things that I've struggled with over the past month is seeing people that I love and cherish that are living with dementia and Alzheimer's. And most of you know what it's like. You know, you visit somebody you love, somebody you've known most of your life. It might be your best friend, your mom, your grandpa, your sister, your brother. And you walk into the room or you walk into their house and they don't know you. This past week, I am thinking of 3 or 4 or 5 people that I visited. I've known them as their minister for 35 and 40 years. And I walk into their room and they say, "Who are you?" And it hurts. Because somehow, some way, you spent all this time with them, and then I walk out of the room and it's like a little hunk of me dies. But I go back, and I go back, and you go back, and you go back. And I think of those words of Jesus when he says, "Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light." You know, we all have burdens. We have loved ones who have burdens. Sometimes it's a burden trying to take care of our loved ones. And there are times when you go through stretches when basically every day feels like a burden. But one thing should never be a burden to you, and that is your faith and your religion and your church. Your church should be a safe place to be, no matter who you are, what you are, and what you've been through. So I came in here this morning, and I have a little jar outside of my office. And there's a group of people called Stitch and Sew. They really don't stitch, and they really don't sew. They get together, and they talk to each other, and they care about each other, and they love each other, and they reach out. And for my birthday, they gave me this jar. And in this jar are little sayings. And every day when I get here, I open the jar, and I take out a little saying. And this is what I said this morning when I took it out. It says here, "There is a calmness to a life that is lived with gratitude. It brings a quiet kind of joy." And I came into the sanctuary, and I sat here, and I read that phrase over and over and over again. Remember years ago they came out with those bracelets, WWJD? What would Jesus do? And I kind of scoffed at that because it seemed like another gimmick where people can make money off religion. But then I realized, what would Jesus do? That's spot on. When you're confused, when you want to reach out, when somebody needs help, when you got a situation, you just got to ask the question, what would Jesus do? Because being a Christian means so many different things. But when you talk about being a follower of Jesus, when you talk about what would Jesus do in that situation, we're not talking about religion, we're talking about life. the way you live, the way you work, the way you care for each other. This morning, my thoughts turned to a guy named Don, whom none of you have never met. He's an ordinary blue-collar guy who at a pretty young age had an aneurysm, and he spent the rest of his life in bed. For months, he had to stay in a motel room by himself with a caretaker. Then finally, he went to his family's home where he lived in the basement in a hospital bed and was almost forgotten by those people closest to him, except for one family in our church who was his neighbor. And for the past umpteen years, they would go to his house, they'd yank him out of bed, they'd get him into a wheelchair, they'd get him outside and push him up the sidewalk to their house for Friday night dinner and family time. Every single Friday night, without exception. And you see, it's stories like that that remind me exactly where Jesus lives and what it means to be a follower. Because being a so-called Christian, being a follower of Jesus, is doing exactly that. Reaching out to somebody and making them feel important and special. You know, most of us, like yesterday, what did you do yesterday? Did you do a lot of ordinary things? I mean, I did a bunch of ordinary things. I want to share them with you because it can't be any more boring than the rest of my sermon. Because most of us spend most of our day doing ordinary things. So yesterday, I came in here and the first thing I did was make coffee. You think my Sunday coffee is good? Come in here on a Saturday morning for my Saturday coffee. Not as much, and it's very special. And then I put a little salt on the sidewalks because it was icy. And after that, a couple of veterans mentioned last week that our American flags are getting a little ragged. Well, I went and got 2 new American flags and put one in the back and one in the front. And then someone mentioned that the sign had not been changed in 3 weeks. So I got my ladder and the letters and I changed the sign. And then I went to the Jewel twice. Once to get what I needed and once to get what I forgot. And then Linda, on Saturday morning, always leaves me a nice array of trash to take out. She puts it by the back door on a cart, in bags. And so I took out the trash. And then I came in here and looked at the prayer book. I realized Don McCabe would love to be able to do ordinary things, like take out the trash and make coffee. Eleanor Lalick, who 2 months ago lived in a beautiful condo and is now in a nursing home because she has dementia, would love to do ordinary things, like make a sandwich for somebody they love or sit down to dinner with somebody. Cindy Johnson, who doesn't even know where she is anymore, would love to do ordinary things, like go to the grocery store and take care of her boys. They would give anything to be able to have a day where they could do ordinary things for themselves and for others. Salt the sidewalk and make coffee and go to the Jewel. So today, this morning, in a world that is often chaotic and sometimes upside down, I say thanks for all those little moments when simplicity takes over. And I think of those words. There is a calmness to a life that is lived in gratitude. It is a quiet joy. I give thanks for that every single day. Amen. If you're able to, please rise for the creed. It's on page 105.